All right, folks. Hello and welcome to the only coast to coast radio show in the US of A that's all about the information economy. It's time for Inside Analysis. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, is here, part of the DM Radio Broadcasting Network. And folks, I'm very excited to have my good buddy and broadcasting legend, Jim Harris, on the line. He is quite the social media influencer these days, has been for a while. He's been going to Davos for years. He's been going to the World Economic Forum. He's been going to CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, for years. And in fact, he is almost always one of the top voices, individual voices for social media amplification at these events. I get his tweets all the time, and they're always very carefully crafted. He always finds really interesting trends to talk about, really cool stuff like solar panels or new technologies that are coming out. Of course, drones are everywhere. And today we wanted to talk about what we saw at CES and what he saw at Davos. I've never been to Davos, at least not yet, but maybe next year I'll be rubbing elbows with the world shakers and movers out there. But Jim, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for doing our program today. And real quick thoughts on CES. What were your impressions from the show this year?
Well, Eric, great to be on the show. And for both CES and for Davos, the top topic was AI.
Hmm.
And every year, Google has its Google I/O Developer Conference. And, it's a multi-day event. The CEO has a couple-hour keynote, and somebody summarized the entire keynote and it into about 12 seconds, and it goes something like this: AI. We're embedding AI. We're taking generative AI. And really, that is what came out of CES and out of Davos. The top
Wow.
trending hashtag for both events was AI. And I'm sure it will be for Mobile World Congress at the end of February and start of March in Barcelona, which is the top global mobile connectivity event.
Right.
So AI is the hottest topic, and it has been since ChatGPT launched November 30th, 2022. Now, I've been talking about AI for a decade, and people just didn't get it. But once ChatGPT had this conversational interface, people understood it, and it is the hottest topic.
Yeah. I mean, it absolutely is. And it's funny because ChatGPT was not new. There were earlier versions of it that some people were already playing around with. So it had been there. But I think it's just the fact that they did this rollout and so many people jumped on to check it out and their minds were just blown, right? I mean, their minds were absolutely blown. And even if Sam Altman says strange things now and again, like he said the era of large language models is over, and everyone was like, huh? Are you talking? Who are you again? I think he was talking about small models, which is very interesting. There's Mistral. There's this sort of I think they call it a combination of experts or a mixture of experts or something, which are smaller models. And my buddies from the Northeastern University, the Institute for Experiential AI, are saying that you don't have to be bigger to be better with these language models, right? And so there's a tremendous amount of innovation in that space. I mean, it's kind of blowing my mind. It reminds me really of the Hadoop days. For those of you who did not know about Hadoop, it came out of Yahoo. It was their engine for indexing the web. It was turned over to Google. They open sourced it, and then companies like Cloudera jumped on, and Hortonworks and MapR. And at one point, there were like 7 distributions of Hadoop, of the Hadoop distributed file system (HDFS), and then there were 6, and there were 5, and 4, and 3, and 2, and 1. And they're like, okay, that was too much. And I kind of feel that way about these models, all these foundational models. But if you look at where it's all going, I mean, these AI models will absolutely revolutionize consumer software, enterprise software. They're being baked into everything. I mean, when I walked around at CES, many of the booths were talking about AI in their smart devices and their smart systems, right? So it's already permeated the electronics industry, right?
Yeah, AI is being embedded in hardware, in software, in internal company processes, in external customer facing applications. So It's being embedded everywhere. And I go to more than 60 conferences a year, Eric.
Wow.
And at every one, AI is the top trending topic. And if you're a startup seeking to raise money from a VC and you don't have the words AI, Gen AI in your pitch deck, you're not getting funded. So it is this relentless drumbeat. And I believe that the innovation we're seeing right now around AI and Gen AI is like the birth of the web in 93. And in
Mm,
1993, we had the internet beforehand, but it was hard to use. It was cryptic, it was user vicious, and you had to remember Unix commands. So it was
right.
there, but nobody in the general public knew about it. Researchers in academe and in the military knew about it, but the people didn't know about it. And once the web was born and you could surf around just by clicking with your mouse, it exploded. And so I was telling my clients in 93, this is going to change everything. And they looked at me, some of them, like I had two heads. Um, but here today, we can see that it is baked into everything 30 years later. And the same is going to happen with AI and generative AI, but the pace of change is infinitely faster. We're turbocharging change right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I should say there are lots of other traditional kinds of technologies that were at the show. I stopped by the Logitech suite and I checked out some of their new stuff. It's very interesting, the Logitech Reach. I did want to give some time to those folks. Very simple product. The announcement date was, I guess, back in September. And what's cool with this, so it's called the Logitech Reach. It's just a boom device for your camera, basically. But they did a couple really clever things. One of which is like a kind of handle you can grab onto such that the perspective doesn't change when you go around a table. Like if you can imagine going around like this and showing different objects on the table, it'll keep the perspective the same instead of turning things upside down, right? You have to kind of see it to appreciate it. But you think about how many creators there are out there for this whole creator economy. You think how many people are trying to do training online, all this stuff. And what's really cool about this is how they launched it. So Logitech went out and they did a GoFundMe campaign when they basically said, hey, this is a new product we're going to develop. If we can raise this money, this is what it'll do. And if you want to be the first one to get it, just go ahead and donate some money to this GoFundMe page and we'll have you on the top of the list. They sold out in like 5 minutes. They raised all the money they needed in 5 minutes. I'm like, "What? That's amazing. What a
Now,
clever plan."
now this is really interesting. This is innovating in how we innovate. Historically, companies spent $2 million to develop a new product and then launched it, and it might go well, it might flop, or whatever.
Right.
But with a GoFundMe campaign, with crowdsourcing, hey, do you really want this? They totally de risk innovation.
That's right.
And I was on a program with a global leader from Lego. Lego's pretty classic. It's made out of plastic. It comes in little squares and shapes and has pegs, and you lock it together. We all played with it as kids. Well, what they've done is they've said to kids, hey, if you want a certain type of Lego set, you tell us what it is, and you get 10,000 of your friends to say they want it too. And you do the marketing, like show us what a campaign would look like. They make all the little children do the work. And then they, once, if they get 10,000 kids excited about it, the product launches.
That's amazing.
Eric, any guesses on how big this crowdsourced business is?
Yeah.
I
That's
feel like
crazy.
Dr. Evil. $1 billion a year. $1 billion a year off of child labor, right?
Yeah, right. That is pretty funny. Well, and they're not the only ones, right? So this is a trend, and I noticed at the Consumer Electronics Show at CES, and it was so cool to see you there. And folks, we had our own booth, our own recording studio for DM radio. So we'll be back next year if you want to be recorded
So, Eric,
from the
who
show
who were
floor.
the other media that were in our block?
Oh, Reuters and CNN and Bloomberg and the Associated Press and DM radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby, hit the big time. But one of the other companies we looked at was LG, Life's Good, and they gave me a whole tour of their technologies, and they did something very similar to what the folks at Logitech are doing, in that they bring out all kinds of prototype technologies and put them on the show floor, and then they watch and see who likes this, who likes that. It's a brilliant strategy for knowing what to work on, right? And these days, man, when margins are tight, when the economy is, it's not in recession, but it's teetering. It's just strange. It's a very strange economy right now. You have to be careful about stuff. And I think you nailed it when you said they have de-risked innovation. And that is a big deal, right?
Big, big deal.
Yeah. Because knowing where to place your bets is so important, especially in manufacturing, because it's got such a long process from concept, ideation, all the way through manufacturing, production, distribution, et cetera. Well, Logitech with this deal, they greased those tracks, just greased the tracks, went right into production, banged this thing out, and it's great. It's very simple, but it's something that wasn't out there before, and they're catering to what the audience wants, right?
So I just want to stress how de-risked it is. Imagine I went to any executive, any CEO and said, "Hey, if I could take your innovation pipeline and guarantee you 100% that every new product would be
Right.
successful out of the gate,
Wow.
right? And it would make you $1 billion, would you pay attention?"
$1
You know,
billion dollars.
should we really look at how do we innovate and how do we innovate and how we innovate?
Yeah. Innovation, innovation. You gotta love that.
It's very meta, very
It is
meta.
very meta. Innovation, innovation, it's just crazy. And, who else did we see? I mean, I walked around quite a bit on the show floor. There's LG, of course. Well, Mastercard, right? If you look at the interesting stuff Mastercard was working on, we interviewed Rajamanar from Mastercard. He is the communications VP, as I recall, and they've done something very interesting, which I think you're gonna see in other iterations in other ways, where they got together with a bunch of trusted content creators and they used existing content to train a model to be a small to mid-sized business AI assistant to help you launch your business. How do you launch a business? How do you set up your books? How do you get clients? All these little things that are very useful. And what's cool about this is, again, like people have to understand these publicly trained models like ChatGPT, there's a ton of information in there. I mean, it's gonna take us years just to figure out what's in there. That's how much is in there, right? But the problem from a business perspective is that's too obtuse. There's too much information, it's too broad. Now, these systems use weightings, basically. That's what they're really doing. And there are tokens, which token is like, I think half a word, they say. And in the early days, the AI could see one token behind it and one token ahead, and that's how it actually cranks out the writing. It might blow people's minds to know that. And then these transformer models came out where now you have almost like a Greek chorus of recommendation components, little bots, and then there's still one decision maker that goes, okay, I'm going to go with this token, that token. But the point is now they can see like five, six tokens right, five, six tokens left, and that's how they develop things. But the point is, the more focused you can be, and this is what they talk about when they talk about embeddings, for example, and training your model, you can really do it one of two ways. You can fine-tune the model itself on the data you train it on, or you can put all your embeddings into a vector database and get this RAG model, what they call regenerative augmented or a retrieval augmented generation. That's what it stands for. Came out of Facebook. And those embeddings are your moorings, basically. That those are your anchors of truth that allow that optimize the quality of the content that you get back. But that's how these things work, right? And as you get more and more narrowly focused on things, that's when you get tremendous value. That's what my buddy Dr. Osama Fayyad says from the Institute for Experiential AI, Northeastern University. The narrow, the better. In fact, one guy said narrow AI is the only AI. Is that what you're hearing as well?
Well, I want to take it and comment on something else first to go to a big picture, which is many people don't know this, but more than 99% of companies in the US are SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises.
Right.
Small, under 100 people, medium, under 500 people, more than 99%. And SMEs, by definition, can't afford an AI data scientist on staff. So MasterCard is aiming at a market that really is the engine of our economy globally and in North America, definitely,
Mhm.
to help them. So a friend of mine is engaged in a startup. He's working with a hospital, and he's used ChatGPT, the developer model, to ingest all their policy manuals,
That's a great
and
use.
uh, so it's a very tightly defined base of knowledge. And you're a frontline manager in the hospital, and you have somebody who's got poor performance. You don't have to go read 60 pages of manuals on how to, do a performance improvement program. You just say, I have a poorly performing employee. What do I do? And the model will just spit out: one, you write them a letter saying your
Right.
performance is poor; two, you develop a PIP, a performance improvement program. You do this, and if after three warnings they're still bad, you fire them. So, but who has time to try and figure out what to do? Or imagine all government documents for the US government being ingested, so you don't have to
Right.
figure out
Right.
how to fill out this form, or do I need that form and this form? And so imagine just making everything simple for people. So this is an amazing set of outcomes. And MasterCard is aiming to do this for the SME market, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and I said we're gonna see more things like this, and, frankly, I'll be giving a speech or a talk at the Data Universe conference in New York, April 10th and 11th, and I'll be talking about the death of journalism, and what I'm talking about is how traditional journalism models, organizational structures are kind of out the window. It's going to be impossible for them to outflank these large language models. They're going to have to join them, and you can't beat them. You got to join them. But folks, don't touch that dial. I'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis with my good buddy Jim Harris, broadcaster extraordinaire, social media master. He's very good at that kind of stuff. It's spreading the word, amplification. Reach out to us if you want your event amplified. Send me an email, info@insideanalysis.com. And we're talking about AI as the top topic at the Consumer Electronics Show. And it was also the top topic at Davos. And in the last segment, Jim, you were just outlining some of the most awesome use cases for AI, which is you feed these models, and I think most companies are going to want their own private model to not have to run the risk of putting their PII or their IP, intellectual property, out into some public model because we really don't know what happens. I mean, ChatGPT is a black box at this point in time. Now, Facebook, I think Llama is open source, so people were screaming bloody murder about that. But hey, man, I say hats off for going open source with this stuff. But you were giving out this really fascinating model use case for AI, which is take volumes of policy documents. So think how governments actually run, the laws, the regulations, the policies, all these things. You can feed them into a large language model, and then you don't need to go poring over details to try to understand things anymore or to get the policies. You just ask your little interactive chatbot, your little buddy, say, hey, how do I fire this person? Or even simple stuff like, how do I register to be a foreign agent? That's a big thing in the US these days. Ooh, did you register to be a foreign agent or not? What does the process look like? Well, hitherto, that was something that only the highest paid lawyers in the country could help you do. Now, you don't need that. Now, I talked to someone who put together a legal document, a memorandum, just using ChatGPT. Brought in, like, showed it to a lawyer. It's like, wow, did you become a lawyer? It's like, no, I just used ChatGPT. And yes, there was that story of the one foolish lawyer who wrote something up and didn't bother to check his sources. But I almost wonder if that wasn't sort of amplified as FUD, fear, uncertainty, and dread. Like, oh, you don't want to use this technology; it'll be dangerous. Like, oh, yeah, to people making $500 an hour to do basic law work, right? That I guess dangerous to their business model. But goodness gracious, you can learn so, and from a government perspective, that is just the most amazing thing ever because most people want to follow the rules. They just may not understand the rules. And now they have an easy on ramp to understanding what that stuff does. What do you think?
Absolutely. We have to pay attention to this. At the Consumer Electronics Show, the CEO of Intel had a keynote where he was being interviewed by the NASDAQ reporter for a media outlet. And he said, we're seeing 10x, 100x,
Wow.
1000x, 10,000x productivity increases use cases. And I thought,
Wow.
is this just hyperbole or is it reality? So I went back and I thought about it. And here's my testing of his statement. So Kathy Wood, who's the CEO of ARK Invest on Wall Street, who's brilliant. I love what she says. She focuses on exponential change and disruption. Her team has said that using generative AI, teams that do coding, programming, will be 10x more productive than teams that don't use AI by 2030. And it's not an either or, it's an and. It's you can't just give your programming to AI. Just like anything I get back from GPT, I don't put out in the world. It's a first draft for me. It gets me 60 to 90% of the way there. So the base case of 10x is Kathy Wood. And then in Davos, I put this statement to a panel, and a woman who was a marketer said, back in the 1980s and the 90s in advertising, when we had a client, we'd sketch out all these boards by hand for an advertising campaign. It would take us 2 weeks. And I thought about Mad Men,
Yes.
very
Right.
Mad Men, right? But today, she said, using ChatGPT and Midjourney, it takes us 2 hours. And I did the math on that, and that's a 500x increase in productivity. Now, her next point was that's not end to end in the process. You still have to meet the client. There's no productivity gain there. You still have to negotiate the final campaign and pricing and everything else.
Right.
But for part of the process, there's a 500x productivity improvement.
That's
So that was kind
crazy.
of the mid use case. And then I began thinking about the 10,000x statement. And every year I go to a conference. It's my favorite conference every year. It's called NextMed. It's looking at the future of medicine.
Hmm.
And a PhD student will spend a whole year studying the interaction of a single protein with all other proteins in the human body to try and understand the emergence of cancer. It takes a whole year to do this study. Well, they gave this process to AI and got back 644 million years of PhD equivalent work. So there's a use case that's 644 million X productivity increase, which is way bigger than 10,000. So in the end, I agreed with the CEO of Intel's statement 10 to 10,000 X productivity increases, but it won't necessarily be across an entire chain of process. It may
Right.
just be part of it. And the other thing that the panelist in Davos said is, when we get these gains, what do we give with them? So rather than just having a couple of boards to show a client, we might actually develop 5 full commercials with AI. In other
Wow.
words, we get
Right.
500x time back, but we'll
Right.
spend half of that giving them more choice, richer choices. So all of these productivity gains don't go to the bottom line. Some of them go to more enhanced outputs.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And again, it's such a game changer. I had a company called Alteryx on a webinar a few months ago, and they're a business intelligence analytics kind of company, and they have something called Magic Documents, which is their use of Gen AI, and it's absolutely brilliant. I was blown away by this. What they do is they allow you to take a report, let's say from your ERP system or your P&L report or something, some report that is generated by a trusted system that you use, a source of record, a system of record, I should say, like your ERP, for example, and you generate your report. It's all numbers of how many products were sold and things of this nature. Then you load that into their system and you give it the target that you want, like PowerPoint, for example, or an article. But the PowerPoint one is quite impressive. And say, generate a 15 slide presentation based on this report that goes zip and just bangs it out, complete with graphics and bar charts and pie charts and all this kind of stuff. And then you just go through and make sure that it got things right, but the point is you don't have to write that thing from scratch. Can I tell you how much time that just saved? Not just time, but painful, unpleasant time. I mean, to be honest, admission here, I've never been a fan of PowerPoint. I don't like how it was set up, the structure. I get where it came from. I understand. I just don't like it. It just kind of annoys me. And here it just steamrolls right through that process. And then what you could do is say, oh, now I want to write this for the IT team, or I want to write this for the marketing team. I want to write this for the board of directors. And it changes the tone and it changes what goes into it such that you can have five different versions of the same report for five different groups that you banged out in like 2, 3 hours instead of 2 to 3 weeks. That's like 40, 50x improvements, and it just solves these painful problems. Now you can spend your time absorbing the information, talking to the board, talking to the marketing team to figure stuff out, because that's still going to be a human process, right? But what did you said before the show, we were talking dull, dirty, and dangerous, like all that kind of stuff is out the window. Those are amazing stories of improvements. And then you look at Davos and what these folks are talking about. These are CEOs, these are government leaders, these are people who are responsible for the well-being of thousands and sometimes millions of people. Guess what? That needs to be top of mind. I'm guessing it was. Tell us.
It was. And you can apply AI to some challenges that you might not think of. So we need to explode exponentially the amount of batteries that we have globally to electrify transportation, for instance, and get away from fossil fuels. And some people criticize EV batteries because, for instance, some of the old ones have cobalt in them, right? Which is a
Right,
conflict mineral, or they're
right.
child miners. Uh, well, you can use AI to look at new battery chemistries, which
Right,
completely eliminate
right,
the need for cobalt at all.
right.
And LFP, lithium phosphate, is lithium iron phosphate, is an example of that. There's no cobalt in it. So,
Right,
yeah, we had a problem with cobalt, and
right.
it's cheaper, and you can scale it faster. So we can use AI to focus on problems. But again, it's going to be the scientists and AI working collaboratively. You can't just outsource problems to AI.
Right. That's right.
People are always going to be part of this, but there are unintended or surprising use cases. So in Davos, I was talking to one executive who is really quite nervous about speaking in front of groups. And his parents were having their 50th wedding anniversary. And he hates, like, he's not a comedian or a humorist. He wanted something that was poignant, that was funny. So he had ChatGPT write the first draft of his wedding toast for his parents. And then he, through an iterative process, he refined it. Well, he gave this talk at his parents' 50th, and his mom came up and said, "Honey, that was fantastic." And his son, who's 11, says, "Yeah, Granny, it was ChatGPT that did it." And of course, Granny doesn't know what the hell the 11-year-old is talking about,
That's
but
hilarious.
We can use this. This is a way of taking everyone and leveling up their skills in all sorts of areas that they're not skilled at.
Well, and let's think just real quick about the medical field, where right now in the United States, I don't know what it's like in Canada. In the United States, it is so segmented and compartmentalized, and you have different groups that are responsible for different things. I mean, I've seen this up close and personal in unpleasant ways, but the point is, you have to get this appointment with this person, and they say, okay, we should talk to that person. That takes 3 weeks to get to that person. Then it takes another 3 weeks to get to some other person, and this just takes time and you're driving all around and waiting and trying to get stuff done. Well, if you think about again, you have to do this responsibly, but if you start and I guarantee it's happening already, you get these models and you start training fairly narrow focused models on all the research that's available, and then any doctor turns into a 10x doctor. Any generalist can understand what the specialists know based upon information that's in the record, that's been understood, that's been researched, that's been shared, proved, vetted, and that's really going to be where the heavy lifting is done now is in training the models and constantly giving them feedback. And this, I'll get back to the Institute for Experiential AI. Dr. Osama Fayyad says all the time, human in the loop. There's always going to be a human in the loop. Don't think you're going to turn this thing on, walk away, and have it do your job for you. No, but it is going to give you all this additional information, all this additional context. You'll be able to see in a particular case, well, actually, 80% of the time that we give this medication, this happens unless there's this other medication that's contraindicated and you have this problem. It used to be you had to sit around and read journals to get all that stuff. Now you'll be able to just interact with your little chat bot in the hospital and say, what are the contraindications for this? Bup, 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 bup. You get them all on the screen for you. What about that? What about for this blood type? Bup, 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 bup. It just all this stuff is going to come flooding out, and we'll finally be able to use this. 'Cause before, the person had to either remember all this stuff or have manuals at their side. And have you ever seen doctors looking at manuals when you're in the hospital? No, they're never doing that. They're just walking around talking to people, doing their thing. Point being, these technologies, this AI stuff is a force multiplier in just about any category. And I'm very encouraged to hear that folks at Davos were talking about that. 1 minute till the next break. Go ahead.
So, 7,000 new medical journal articles came out today. So the question is, has your general practitioner, has your doctor read them all this morning?
Right.
You know, so we're going to have to use AI if we want the best outcomes. And it's not going to be, okay, the AI is going to be your doctor. It's going to be your doctor plus AI are going to way outperform doctors who don't use AI. And you'll have better health outcomes.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. It's going to be your doctor plus AI. Your doctor's not going away, but you're going to hope that your doctor uses this stuff because they're going to be way, way, way informed. Folks, don't touch that dial. I'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking to the legend himself, Jim Harris, broadcaster, social media expert, world traveler, 60 conferences a year, and he does it every year. I don't know how he does that. He jumps all over the planet. Mobile World Congress is coming next, folks. So if you want some amplification at Mobile World Congress, send me an email. Info@insideanalysis.com. Email's not going away, by the way. I just want to say everyone keeps talking about the NBL. Not going to happen. Email is still king for communication, for transactional, for important stuff. Send them an email, even if it's just got a link in it to the Zoom, right? It's like, where's it? Just get my email. But everything is changing. It's changing at like rapid speed. And I'm glad to hear that at Davos and CES, these were very, very hot topics. And, we have to look on the bright side. It's going to be really fun and interesting to dive into this. And I'll give you my theory about how media is going to change dramatically. You're going to see smart news organizations figure out that they need to leverage their voice and train their own models on their content, on their style, and then start using this stuff to generate content. And then again, the role is going to be not so much the reporter, but the curator. So you still will want to check facts. You'll still want to check dates and specifics and things of that nature. But you're going to, what I think is going to happen here is you're going to have systems of record connected to LLMs, spinning out useful bits of information or really persisting it in a model somewhere. And then the reader, like you, me, whoever else, will have a much more personalized, engaging experience with the journalist, which is going to be their own personal journalist. You're going to be like, let's say I name my journalist Bob, like, hey, Bob, what happened at the city council meeting last night with respect to the new tax cuts or something? And it'll be like, well, Congressman so and so said this, that, and it'll just tell you all this stuff. And then you're going to have this interactive process where you're just asking it what's going on relevant to you. Think about how much better that is for an individual. I think if you look at traditional broadcast media, and you've spent a lot of time in that world, it was this one size fits all model where everyone who's watching the show is watching it at the same time stamp, at the same continuum, is getting the same exact content. That's not good enough anymore. People need personalized content that is relevant for them. And that's why I think broadcast is going to have some trouble dealing with all this stuff. But how do you see, I mean, you're a broadcaster. How do you see the future of media panning out here?
Well, media is going to have to change. I mean, I've been a journalist for 40 years and I've seen huge amount of change. When I got into television, we used to have these $1 million edit suites where we'd actually have tape to tape,
Yeah,
and
right.
the tape was edited and cut with X-Acto knives, and with Scotch tape put back together.
Right.
And now you can do all the editing on a laptop or on even your mobile phone with titling and everything else. So uh, I've seen head spinning change over the 40 years I've been a journalist. I want to
Wow.
give another example that people might not think of. How ChatGPT and generative AI can save up to $360 billion in the US healthcare system.
Hmm.
So if you go to your doctor and the doctor wants to order a test, but the insurance company in the US denies paying for it, that doctor has to write an appeal letter. Why I deserve to have this test done.
Hmm.
So there's this urologist who was writing about 5 appeal letters a week, taking 20 to 30 minutes for each one. Now he just uses ChatGPT without using the patient's name or the insurance company. It basically instantly it spits out a letter as to why this particular condition needs this test, including citations from medical journals.
Wow.
So take 5 appeal letters a week at 30 minutes. And what is 150 minutes every single week of a urologist's time worth who's on a $250,000 salary? You do the math, it's big numbers. So we're going to see AI eliminating wasteful, inefficient administrative work
Oh,
in the medical system. And that can be worth, by one analysis of a major consulting firm, $360 billion a year.
that's
Blows me
crazy.
away. I'll give you another example that comes from NextMed, which I mentioned in the first segment. It's my favorite conference. Well, there was a doctor from the NHS in the UK, National Health Service. It is the largest single payer provider in the world. They do 156 billion pounds of healthcare funding every single year.
Wow.
And during the pandemic, 25 million people a year missed their appointments. Now,
Right.
this is problematic because, you have wait times to get an appointment with a specialist, and then somebody misses their appointment. That's terrible. And there are health consequences. If you're a woman and you miss 2 mammograms, you increase the chance of stage 3 breast cancer by 300%.
Wow.
Or if you have a retina problem and you miss a single appointment, you can increase your chance of blindness 5,000%. So it's not just the 25,000 missed appointments, it's the medical outcomes of not catching things early enough.
Right.
So this doctor, very frustrated, looked at the 25 million missed appointments, and without using any medical data. So he was only using databases with age, income, geography, those kind of things. He was able to predict, based on history, who would miss their appointment for
Wow.
upcoming.
Wow.
And then they do this 8 weeks before assigning appointments. They can then say, now, here are some of the reasons. It might be an elderly man who doesn't want to get on the tube late at night because his eyesight is bad, right? So
Right.
you've given him a 9 p.m. appointment and he misses it. Or it might be a single mom you give an appointment during the day, but she can't afford to take time off work, so she misses it. So the system, the AI predicts who will miss their appointment, and then they get busy in trying to mitigate that. In other words, give them the first choice of appointments where they're going to actually show up. And where this system has been tested, it has increased the capacity of the NHS by 6%.
Wow.
Now, when you do the math on that, that's 9 billion pounds
Wow.
of value being
Right.
created with no medical data, just normal parameters, so nothing confidential. So
Right.
this blows me away. We're going to be using AI for profound uh, outcomes, and if we don't use it, we're disadvantaging ourselves. Like,
Well,
imagine increasing the capacity of the healthcare system by 6% with
right.
zero cost.
That's crazy. And, you reminded me of something. We had Dan Bodner on the show a couple months ago, I guess. He is the CEO of Verint, Verint. Look those folks up online. And they've got 35 bots now. And it was interesting. I was talking with him about bots and, maybe they'll be richer, more interesting, et cetera. And he goes, oh, actually, what our perspective is that with a bot, you want it to be very, very good at one thing. And then that's what it does. It does that one thing and it does it extremely well. And he was talking about scheduling and what a nightmare scheduling is for someone who runs a hospital, for the nurses, for the doctors on call, for all this kind of stuff, because hitherto the scheduling problem is highly manual. And the person in charge of scheduling has to be like, okay, Bob is called in sick now. Who can I call? And you have to go look up phone numbers and kind of scratch your head. Oh, who could I get? It's painful. It's a very unpleasant process. He said what they did is they put a program together. It's like a points system where if you agree to take someone's role when they're sick, you get a few extra points. If it's a really nasty shift, you get even extra points. And they keep track of all this stuff. And now, anytime someone's out, you just hit a button, it goes, ask him. If you don't want to ask him, all that stuff is automated. So now there's like that scheduling problem is it's problem solved, done. You're like, what? Like that used to be one of the hardest jobs for people who are in admin in hospitals and different facilities. And like, problem solved. Next, what else you got? Why don't you go talk to the patient for a few minutes, right? Oh yeah, that's right, the patients. So I mean, these are amazing examples of how these technologies, these algorithms can tackle very complex challenges very easily for almost no money. I mean, you have to pay for the software and get things installed. But once it's there, that is a massive game changer. 1 minute left. What's your advice to the world, Jim?
Well, we have to embrace this technology. If you look at 150 years ago, 80% of jobs in the US were in agriculture. And there were huge protests when farm automation came along, tractors and combines, like, what'll happen to all the horse people? The horse
Right?
people, the horse people.
Horse
But,
people.
here we are 150, 160 years later, and agriculture employment is less than 2%. So we survived farm automation.
Right.
But what is certain is that jobs changed, people had to learn and reskill, society changed, companies had to change. So this is really a story not about the technology, but about change, about reskilling.
That's right. Reskilling folks. Get out there, get out, start using this stuff. Folks, you've been listening to Inside Analysis.